Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lighthouse Sessions. I'm excited because I have my friend Vern Schellenger with me today. Vern, welcome to the show. Let's talk about your title, Master Connector.
Well, my title, Master Connector, I didn't get that early in my career. I can tell you that. In fact, at one point, I worked for a company that most people know called Dunkin' Donuts for 25 years. And had a very successful career within Dunkin' Donuts, but all I knew was Dunkin' Donuts. I was kind of like in a cocoon. And networking, what do I need networking for? I'm in a great company, I'm getting promoted, and everything's wonderful. Well, what most people don't know is in the 1990s, Dunkin' Donuts was bought by a British firm. And when those takeovers come about, lots of changes. And eventually the changes caught up with me, and I said, I really need to move on. I started my job search, and within the first week, I became very much aware of the fact that I didn't know the first thing about networking. So there's actually a learning paradigm that says when I was the first 25 years of my life with Dunkin' Donuts, I was the unconscious incompetent, which means you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And so in the first week of my job search, I became the conscious incompetent. I'm very much aware of the fact that I don't know the first thing about networking, and if I didn't learn how to network, I said I will, I'll never find a job. So that's how I got introduced to networking. I learned enough about networking to land a job, but I was far from an excellent networker. And using some of the skills that I learned, I was able to land my dream job through a contact that I had met who actually recommended me for the position. And this is one of the things about networking that most people, I don't think, are really aware of. There is a hidden job market. There's lots of jobs that are never posted anywhere on the internet. And the only way you could find out about one of those jobs is someone in your network being aware of it and letting you know that this job exists, which it was. And it was a job in career management. So I worked for one of the major global career management firms for 5 years. And then I really did learn how to network. I became, a conscious competent. We were teaching people how to network to help them land their jobs. And so I thought I knew everything there was to know about networking. And then in 2006, I was introduced to Lynn Wayman and her sister Ann Baber, who had just written a book called Make Your Contacts Count. I read the book and I was kind of blown away. It was such a different, fresh, skills-based approach to networking. It was so much better than anything that I had learned previous about networking. Not that the stuff that I had learned was bad, but this stuff was just so much better. So I reached out to him and I said, I really would like to be part of whatever you're doing. I said, with the one caveat, I have a full-time job, but I know you're looking to certify and train, people to deliver the contacts count approach. And, I'm willing, if you're willing to certify me, which they did. So from 2006 to 2021, I was a certified coach trainer with contacts count. And then in 2021, they decided to retire and I bought the company. And one of the things that drove me to buy the company is simply what I've learned and the passion I've developed for the powers of networking. The tagline for the Contacts Count logo is the power of human connection. And there's just so many positive outcomes that can come when you develop what we call a trust-based, mutually beneficial relationship with another human being. Just you think about all of the things that others can provide to you. Career advice, they can help you find a job, they can help you learn, they can help you solve problems, they can introduce you to other people in their network. it goes on and on and on, right down to, hey, I took a vacation here and this is the best place in the world to take a vacation. So it's not only professional, but it can be personal when you develop those types of relationships.
I love that. And I like to tell people I actually met my wife through networking. And, I was at a work party for friends. And one of the other guests said, "Oh, you're single. I know somebody you need to meet." And that was 24 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's when
Yeah.
people tell me networking doesn't work, I'm confused. And I know why it doesn't work for them, but I'm confused why they'd choose to not learn it, because a lot of people are very transactional.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that people choose not to learn it is they just put it in. Oh God, this is too hard. I can't do this. They have a mindset that says, I just can't do this. This is too hard.
Yeah.
What the brilliance of Contacts Count and what Lynn and Ann did is they did so much research. They were ultimately able to develop 8 competencies. So each of these 8 competencies have skills, behaviors, tools, strategies that actually teach people how to network. And it's broken down right to a simple formula in many cases. And once we developed the 8 competencies, then we developed an online assessment. So I can send you a link and you can take this assessment and it will give you a score on every one of those 8 competencies, and it'll give you a score on your overall ability to network. We've probably done, it's in the thousands of these assessments. And what our research shows is that upwards of 65% of all of the results, the average score is between 40 and 60. Which tells us that people definitely can improve in networking. And what we find if we work with a client and we get into building skills, we find that there's skills people had never thought of using, weren't aware of, and they take a while to learn. But once they learn them and they start to use them, we see positive results within 60 to 90 days, not only in their ability to connect, but even in their level of confidence and comfortable, being comfortable in going into a conversation. And we look at networking, the first competency is all about that mindset. It's called adopt a positive networker identity. So everybody has a networker identity. Whether it's, I hate to network, I've tried it, it doesn't work for me, that's your networker identity.
Yeah.
Okay? At Contacts Count, when we talk about adopting a positive networker identity, we talk about making your mindset one of simply teaching and giving. So every conversation that you have the opportunity, you have the potential opportunity to teach someone something about who you are, what you're all about, what kind of work you do, and you have the opportunity to learn something about them. So, and then the second competency is, okay, how do I teach others about who I am? How do I communicate my expertise? The third competency is, okay, how do I engage others? How do I learn about them? So, a typical response to, if you ask me, what do I do? I can now say, I'm the president and CEO of Contacts Count. That's what most people do. The title, the company, the organization, some combination of those, which really has 2 problems. The question is, what do you do? So it didn't really answer the question.
Okay? Yeah. What's on your business card?
Yeah, you're right. And the second problem is you just missed this very first opportunity to teach someone something about yourself, right? They said, what do you do? And again, this is where people struggle. We're kind of conditioned to title and profession and company and whatever. A much better way to answer that what do you do question is a simple 2-sentence response. if you ask me, what do? I basically say I teach people the skills and behaviors to build mutually trust-based, mutually beneficial relationships. I just finished a program with the MBA students at George Washington University, where they said, this program has literally changed my life. That's a much more powerful introduction. It gives somebody something to think about, something, and in the best cases, people will say things like, well, change their lives. How did it do that?
Yeah.
And now they're inviting you to teach more about who you are and what you are. However, you've really got to be conscious to not make it a one-way street, right? I said it's about teaching and giving. So we really stress with people, you've got to, it's fine, okay, talk for a minute or two and teach about yourself, but then you've got to, switch gears and say, okay, Jeff, tell me a little bit about you and what do you do? And, what are some of the things you're working on now?
Yeah.
And try to get them to, to teach you something about themselves. The more conversations you have with one person around teaching and giving, this is how a trust-based, mutually beneficial relationship develops. And those are the relationships that are absolutely gold mines for you.
And I love that. And if I may add, Vern, one of my go-tos is I always let the other person introduce themselves first, because I am curious to the nth degree. And if I can understand what they do, then I tailor what I'm sharing to them. Because, if I met somebody the other day who is a blacksmith, well, he's not looking to network to meet people in the business space. He's looking to meet people who own horses. Well, my introduction is very different than if I came in thinking he's a business contact, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. And, and every, we could have literally 25, 50 conversations a day. Some of them are transactional. Some of them, the other person is, kind of reserved and they're not starting the conversation. So you start it, but there's certainly nothing wrong if you start the conversation and you start to learn and learn from them. And the analogy we use in terms of learning about another person is we use the analogy of an iceberg. Your first couple of conversations, first 3 conversations, you're kind of above the waterline. We know what's above or we learn what's above the waterline, but we know in an iceberg, there's a whole lot more to it. And it's over time and multiple conversations where you really begin to develop the relationship.
And I think that's the thing I see, and for what it's worth, Vern, I think you and I are going to have multiple conversations on this topic. I'm teaching my kids in junior high and high school how to network. And they both look at me like I'm from Mars, and I'm like, trust me. Because when I got out in business, I was an accountant early days in my career, and everyone just assumed I could play golf and I knew how to network. I hate golf. I am terrible at it. And I was equally terrible at networking. And I'll share this just for your benefit, because I think it'll resonate with you. I went to every networking event I could, and I hated every one of them. I'd get there with this anxiety, and I'm like, okay, I'm an introvert. I own it. And I was like, okay, the books I'd read at that time said, you have to go and you have to shake as many hands as you can. And by the 10th person I'd met, my anxiety was up here, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go sit in the car for a minute. And nobody teaches networking, or nobody was at that time. But what I learned was, for me, I want and needed 3 deep, meaningful conversations. So that was my goal. I would now go to events with a goal. I would meet 3 people that had good conversations with. And as soon as I hit 3, I could run out the door.
Yeah.
And it was easier for me. So
So your experience is going back to the earlier comment about, people. I mean, that's another reason why people say, I hate this networking thing. They go and they have those kinds of experiences and they say, I don't ever want to do this again. This is, this is painful, right?
Yeah.
So, and to your point, the focus of three people, that's kind of what Context Count thinks about. Try to have your conversations one-on-one with people, and people that you feel you can connect with. Again, we don't know in those very few first conversations, the level of trust between two people meeting and having a couple of conversations is not very strong. It can't be. We don't know enough about each other. But as you have multiple conversations and you start to help one another and you learn more and more about the person, you learn more about their character, you learn more about their interests, you learn more about their abilities. That's where the giving can start on both ends of the relationship.
I love it. Now, I will ask you to share the link so we can give people the assessment, because I think I'm fascinated by a principle called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And if you've heard of it.
I'm familiar with it. Yes. Yeah.
For the listeners, Dunning-Kruger effect basically says that novices overestimate their abilities and experts deeply discount their abilities. And the simple fact is, when you're new to something, you don't know what you don't know. When you're an expert, and I find this fascinating with networking, the most expert networkers I know downplay their expertise because they know what they don't know.
Yeah.
So I think, and what I love about, I'm an assessment junkie. I love assessments. And I see this as a game of golf. You're not competing against anyone. It's not, hey, Vern, I got a score higher than you. I beat you. It's, I took the assessment today, and I don't know if this works with your assessment, but my goal from the assessment today, if I get a 60, I want to figure out how to become a 70. So is the assessment something people could retake?
Yes. In fact, we almost mandate that because we want to show, a definite improvement, and we're consistently able to do that, provided the person is committed to doing the hard work, learning some new skills, making mistakes. Because the first time, I gave you the answer to the what do you do question and kind of rolled off my tongue. Well, most time when people, first of all, they have to kind of write it out. What am I going to say? And they struggle doing that. And they write 2 paragraphs as opposed to 2 sentences. And it takes a while to hone it and get something you can really feel comfortable with. So that's certainly part of it. And so we have people take the assessment as soon as we start working with them, or they've gone to a webinar and they've taken the assessment and they call me and they say, I'd like you to, work with me to improve my skill. And then we have them take the assessment after, whatever the engagement is. And typically the scores are 20, 30, 40% higher.
I love that. And you and I are going to be friends, Vern, because anybody who is about constant improvement, if I ever get to the point where I say, I'm an expert, I've learned everything, I hope that's the day I die, because if I'm not learning, I don't know who I am.
Right. Yeah, we have so many opportunities in the world today to learn about so many different things. Obviously, we've got to narrow it down to what we can what we want to learn and the time we have to learn it. But again, the context count approach with this skills base, and the other thing that you said about going to that networking event, you actually used one of the other competencies. You said, I'm going to the networking event. I'm going to meet 3 people, right? And then I'm going to go home. Basically what you did is, the 4th competency is take a strategic approach. Okay.
Yes.
Why am I networking in the first place? Okay. Yep. What do I want to, accomplish in networking? And then you take it further. Who are the people in my network that I know now that might help me? If there's people in my net that are not in my network, how do I go about getting introduced to them, or how do I find them? And so most people, again, going back to your story, they just go to a networking event, right? And that's just another aspect of a networking event that makes them feel terrible about networking.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I remember sitting in my car doing breathing exercises, okay, pumping myself up. And then I got to be really honest, and this probably gets into future competencies, but once I got their business card, I was like, oh crap, now what? I didn't have a plan. And, I accidentally became good at networking because I hated paid, I didn't want to get better at sales. I didn't want to get better at marketing. I just wanted to meet good people. And the other lesson I learned early was be in the right room. A lot of networking events I went to were hosted by realtors. And for some reason, I was meeting all these people who were real estate adjacent, mortgage brokers, home inspectors. I was like, I don't want anybody in this room. Why am I here?
Sure. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that goes back to take a strategic approach. It's and we've only got 24 hours every day, and so use your time wisely. Again, and yet we use strategic planning in a lot of other parts of our lives, and we don't even think about it. Okay,
Yeah.
Taking a vacation. Okay, where do I want to go? Right. Well, you pinpoint someplace you want to go, and then you put a plan together.
Yeah. I don't know anybody that shows up at the airport and says, okay, I got $1,000. Where can I get to today?
Yeah.
We generally plan, and it's fascinating. I'm not kidding. I've seen people put more thought into which car do I buy than they do into who do I network with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, I would argue, and I assume you're on that page too, the network you have determines everything in your life. What you learn, who you meet, how you experience things, how you learn things.
Yeah, there's actually multiple peer review studies that have pretty conclusively proved that the number one predictor of career success is an open network.
Yeah.
A network that's broad, a network that's diverse. And the more diverse your network, the greater success you have in your career. Now, a lot of that was done within organizations, but a lot of that research applies to the world today. Whether even if you're an entrepreneur and have a small business, you've still got a network of people around you. You probably have some legal advice. You probably have an accountant. You might have tech, support. You've got a group of people that are helping you be successful in your business, and so being aware of that those relationships are critical to your success going forward.
And for what it's worth, Vern, the best networking advice I ever received was from an introverted accountant who created something so that she never had to network. She hated, again, going to the big networking events. But what she did was she identified 10 people in her business ecosystem that all had value for her clients. And what she did, she didn't want to do speaking. She didn't want to do anything. She rented a hotel suite, one of those conference centers once a month. And she brought in her favorite experts, and she'd invite her clients. They'd invite their clients. And basically, as the host of the event, her entire mission was she got up, hands shaking at the podium. She'd introduce the speaker, and then she'd run to the back of the room and breathe into a paper bag. But her business grew because she was introducing people to her network.
Yeah. And showing the value that she brings, that she can create for her clients. Plus, they were getting the benefit of all of these other experts. That's a great example.
In our time together, I have two myths that I hate and I hear all the time, and I want to hear your take on them. I promise neither one is tricky, but myth number one, I hear all the time, networking is dead.
Okay.
What would you say to somebody who comes to you and says, Vern, networking is dead?
And what evidence do you have that would show me that networking is dead? Let me count the ways that networking has played a role in my life, and
Yeah.
how it's been successful. And I can tell you about my clients. So, networking is dead. I worked with a person at the World Bank. He grew up in Kenya, graduated from college in Kenya, and he started to work in his family businesses. They had a suite of businesses, and he was an ultimate failure. He came to the United States, got his MBA, worked his way up the ranks of the World Bank, and somehow got in touch with Contacts Count. He said, "I have a dream. I want to build an educational institution in Kenya." But he says, "I don't know where to start." And he said, "I'm terrible at networking. I don't have any contacts." And so we worked with Cello for about 6 months. And lo and behold, today that educational institution exists.
I
So
love it.
when somebody says, networking is dead, and he started, and he got introduced to people that could help him. He got, introduced to people that would fund it, people who, became part of the, the development of the educational institution. And I have lots of stories like that, where those are some of the types of outcomes that people get when they really, really dig in and learn, the skills, the behaviors we try to teach people about networking.
That is a fabulous response. And for what it's worth, Vern, I used to rant and I'd be like, "You're wrong," and I'll prove it. What I realized was they were unconscious incompetent. And I was like, "I'm just going to walk away from this. I'm not here to fix you."
Yeah, right.
Because
Right.
really
Which
what
is
they're
it-
saying is networking doesn't work for me and I don't want to learn.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it was interesting. I just had a conversation with a colleague who said to me, he said, "I just talked to one of my friends and they could really use your help." And I said, "Well, why don't you, I'm going to send you the link to the networking competency assessment. Why don't you have them take it? And I'm happy to go over it with them and start to give them some advice." He picked up the phone, he called his friend, told him about the networking competency assessment. And his friend said, "I don't need that. I'm excellent at conversations. I can talk all day to people." He said, "The problem is they don't engage with me."
Yeah.
Right. So, put the blinders on. Yes, there's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. They don't engage with you. Have you thought about why they don't
Yeah.
engage with you? Okay. And yet he's considering himself a great networker.
Dunning-Kruger kicks us in the butt every time. The second myth I hear all the time, and this one, it makes me giggle. It's usually some version of "I'm too old" or "too something" to learn networking. And to me, that's fascinating because it's like saying I'm too old to keep breathing. It just...
Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody who said, "It's not worth my time to learn this because, I've got Facebook ads or something"?
Well, I would certainly talk to them about the benefits of networking and what networking can do in terms of both impacting their professional and personal life. I can show them the research. I can show them the studies. The multiple peer review studies have, proven that open network is the number one predictor of career success. I can give them a lot of data and information about why networking is so important. But if their mindset is it ain't for me and I don't want to do it, and there are people like that, then okay, then that's your mindset, and I'll just move on. We actually have, and I've written a blog on the website about the 8 myths of networking, and so I think that's in there somewhere. And this also speaks to actual networking when you're having conversations with other people. Some people you just kind of naturally connect with, right, in the very first few conversations.
Yeah.
And other people, it seems to be a struggle. And again, we only have so much time. So if you're not really connecting with the person, then just move on. Now if they keep reaching out to you and they want to have conversations with you, then you've got to kind of manage that somehow. But don't let somebody impose their time on you because they want to be, part of your network. You've got to, first priority is you, okay? What's important to you, and who are the people you need in your network?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think honestly, and Vern, I'm old enough to know better now. When somebody starts to attack networking, I just back away quietly because it's kind of like fighting over my religion's better than yours. It's like I can't win this argument. I just the only way to win is to not have it.
That's right. That's right.
And honestly, the fascinating thing, I meet people like you. We're going to have a conversation about how amazing networking is. I know that's a conversation I want to be part of.
Yeah. It's it's wasted time to try to convince somebody who's, their mindset is so fixed, and in terms of where they're at, that don't spend a lot of time with it, as you said, just back away. Yeah.
I love it. Now I'm going to ask you the hardest question of the entire interview because it's important to get the hard stuff. How does somebody work with you? So somebody takes the assessment and a little self-awareness, and they look in the mirror and go, oh my God, I'm not as good as I thought, or I'd like to get better. How do they work with you? What does that look like?
Well, what that looks like is we begin with the assessment, and sometimes in an assessment, what we find is for certain competencies, people actually have a high score. They might score 85 on one of the competencies, but they'll score 30 on the other competency. So obviously we look at that, and we look at the competencies that they need to work on the most. And so, for example, the second competency, communicate your expertise. Almost none of my clients, or none of the clients we've worked with, have a response to the what do you do question that comes anywhere close to what I shared with you. So that is one of the very first things that we work with them on. And literally they'll write it down, we'll give them some feedback, we'll role play, okay? What do you do? And hear their response, give them some more feedback, shorten it, change this word, change that word. And then they've got to practice it until they're comfortable enough to actually go to a networking meeting and use it. And of course, if they say, okay, there's this networking meeting, I'm saying, okay, go to it. We meet next week. How did it go? What worked? What didn't work? What were the challenges you faced? And the depending on the length of the engagement, obviously the longer it is, the more we can teach people and the more they can gain from it. But somebody within even a really, and one of the things that we take pride at Contact Scout is we really try to customize, our engagement with any client we work with to what they need based on our knowledge and their assessment. And then, of course, we take the assessment at the end of the engagement.
I love that. And we will put that link in the show notes. So if somebody wants to get to know you, connect with you, where can they find you, Vern?
Well, one of the first places they can find me is LinkedIn. Just, put in Vern Schellenger and, I'll pop up. That's the way LinkedIn works. Obviously they can check out the website. It's contactscount.com. It's pretty simple. And on the website, there's opportunities for them actually to take a short mini assessment. It's like a 5-minute assessment versus the actual assessment takes 20 to 30 minutes to complete, but they can get a feel for what the assessment would be like. They can also sign up for the newsletter, and those are some of the best ways to get in touch with me.
I love it. Well, Vern, I want to thank you so much because I know when I meet somebody else that has master networker, master connector in their title, I love hearing their stories. I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Well, Jeff, I want to thank you for hosting, and this has been a great conversation. And of course, it's always great to talk to someone who values networking as much as I do.